All right. Well, I am here with my friend Sean Sheridan, and Sean and I have known each other for over 30 years. We ran track together at the University of Kansas, and Colorado Springs is his hometown, whereas I'm a transplant. And he is a world-renowned photographer. He's worked with Bill Gates. He's taken pictures of celebrities, but what he's most known for is his work taking photographs and documenting people in developing countries and trying to draw attention to their plight and try to make the world more aware of the needs in those countries. And so my students at Palmer High School have come up with 15 questions, and we're going to be asking Sean those questions right now.
You ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
When you left school, what was your first real job? Did you see yourself in this kind of work?
When I got out of college, like most people, my first job was kind of a random, not a great job. I worked in franchise sales for a temporary help company. It was a really formal environment. I had to wear a suit and tie to work every day, and I was basically miserable. It was terrible. So it was not, really doing what I am doing. It had nothing to do with what I'm doing now, period. In a roundabout sort of way, I ended up as a photographer doing this kind of work. There were a couple important steps between that first job and where I'm at today, and I think the first job was helpful in sort of informing me what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to be in a corporate environment, just sitting in a cubicle, enslaved to the man. I wanted to be out where sort of the action was and where things were happening. I wanted to see that for myself and witness that for myself. So, in a roundabout sort of way, I set out to get to that place, and here I am.
When you arrive in a new place, how do you know what to shoot? Do the shots present themselves, or do you actively seek them out?
Yeah, so when I come into a shoot location or a scene, which is generally, a community or somebody's home, or in a case of like a natural disaster, like a hurricane setting or an earthquake setting, usually the opportunities sort of present themselves. It's pretty obvious to me now, especially after having done this for a long time, like what it is that I'm looking for. And I always go on an assignment with a shot list of sorts from the client. The client always tells me, hey, here's what we're looking for. But even with that, even with a defined list of, hey, we need this, and that, there's always stuff that I see that I bring, back to them that they weren't expecting. And that's super helpful because then they're really happy, and a happy client's a repeat client. And I take a lot of satisfaction in finding stuff that, only I could see, or things that might be surprising to them. So it's really both.
Cool. When visiting a developing country, what obstacles do you run into? Have you ever felt that your life was at risk?
Yeah, so developing countries, there's lots of obstacles, and it really starts even before I go on the trip. Sometimes I have to get a visa that can be challenging at times. Getting there can be challenging. There can be lots of obstacles to even getting to some of these places. Crazy flight schedules, flights that only operate some days during the week. Sometimes I have to figure out how to get into a country. So the obstacles start before I even get there. Then once on the ground, there's language barriers, there's differences in climate. Most of the time I'm shooting like really hot places. It's humid. So there's definitely like a sort of a physical obstacle. Time change, food that, doesn't make my stomach feel very good. So, it's not unusual to feel sick. So tons of that kind of stuff, but that's just sort of like par for the course. That's like travel. So, at a minimum, I always have to overcome some sort of travel obstacle. So there are definitely some places that I've gone where like the political climate is not super calm or peaceful, and or places where Americans generally are not like really welcome. So those would be like countries that a lot of countries in Africa have geopolitical problems, like their governments aren't stable. And I've found myself in situations where we have to be really careful about where we go. For instance, like shooting a lot in and around Syria during the Syria war. Places like Lebanon, Jordan, Turkey, Iraq. Those can be dangerous places, period, for Americans to go. There's always a green zone where you got to stay, within that safe zone, because outside of that green zone, there's bad actors. You've got ISIS, you've got radical Muslim groups that aren't, keen that you're there with a camera. So I felt at times that, it's certainly dangerous. I've not really felt too often that my life was in imminent danger, although there have been sketchy times where we're like, hey, we need to get out of here, like now, let's go.
Right, cool. Because you're sometimes asked to leave the country on short notice and are gone for weeks on end, how do you and your family adapt to your absence?
Yeah, so leaving on short notice or being gone a lot, that's just something that has been hard, period. Like, I don't like being away from my family. They would prefer if I'm here. So because the nature of my work is largely humanitarian, I think they understand that what I'm doing has an impact on people's lives. So I think as a trade-off for me being gone a lot, I do think they take some comfort in knowing that the work is helpful and it is making a difference in people's lives. With that said, it's not easy being gone, and I do think, so I'm married and I have 4 kids. If I had married a woman that was super needy or didn't want me being gone, it'd be a real problem. This wouldn't work. But fortunately, I married a strong woman who is happy and capable to take care of herself and the kids in my absence. It does work, but it's not for everybody.
Can you tell us more about the photograph of the man with a gunshot wound to the head?
Right, so the photograph of the man with the bullet hole in his head, that guy's name is Emmanuel. He's a Rwandan survivor of the genocide. So a certain place in Rwanda, there was this, in the interior of Rwanda, there was a college campus where, when the genocide started, as a ruse, everyone said, hey, go to this campus, you'll be able to stay there, there's places to stay, there's water and some food. Just go there and ride it out, you'll be protected. Well, it was a ruse to get more people in one place to kill them. Emmanuel was one of the people that took his wife and kids to that college campus. And so the killing commenced, and his wife and kids were shot and killed and thrown into a mass grave. He was also shot, thrown into the mass grave. Well, he didn't die. He was one of about 5 people, about 20,000 people that survived. And he woke up in a pile of bodies with his wife and kids right there, dead, in the middle of the night, and under cover of darkness, escaped to Burundi. He'd walked out, crossed the border, waited it out. I met him, I think it was about maybe 10 or 12 years ago, on a trip to shoot in that part of the country, and went to this genocide, what is now a genocide memorial. And I met him there, and I saw him, and I was like, hey, I was talking to my translator, I was like, hey, what's up with the guy with the, bullet hole in his head? And he said, well, he's a survivor, and he now comes back, and to honor his wife and kids, he'll take people on tours. And so I got to know him. I sat down with him, got to know him, and he sort of epitomized to me, the things the stories I wanted to tell, and the photographs I wanted to take that would shed light on big issues. And his certainly was a compelling story. And every time I went back to Rwanda, I'd go track him down and see him. The last time I went to Rwanda, 3 years ago, I took my family, and my wife and I ended up making the journey to go try to find Emmanuel. And when we got to the memorial, we found out that he had died. So it was kind of sad, but I have a special connection and bond with that guy. The bullet hole never scared me. In fact, it made me want to understand, what he'd been through. So it was a really good example of the kind of work that I do, and that I'm trying to get to the heart of the story and present that in compelling pictures, designed to move people to action.
Many of your subjects are people in war-torn countries or experiencing famine and disease. Does it make it difficult sometimes to photograph people in such troubling circumstances?
Yeah, so going to places where there's been conflict or, basically death and dying, that's been hard at times. When I first started doing it, I had this natural sort of attraction to, I want to see what's out there. So for years, I'd walk into a scene where I'd see, something troubling. I'd be fascinated by it, but I'd also be feeling like, how am I supposed to react to this? Like what? How am I supposed to feel about this? This is like real stuff. And I never had, any really good answers to that. I still don't. But I realized what came out of that was sort of my own journey and trying to figure out, if that was me or my family in that situation, I would want somebody to intervene. I would want somebody to be an advocate for me. So I quickly shifted from asking, why is this happening, to what can I do about it? Because I feel like I have a responsibility, having seen these things and been in these areas, to try to tell the story and make a difference. All the while knowing, I have this information, I can't keep quiet now.
Right.
And if it were my family or me, I would really want and need somebody to be an advocate. So I think, in short, trying to deal with it, I've come to the place where I'm okay with not having really good answers to why these things happen, but rather what can I do about it and what's my responsibility. And that's been really helpful for me. And I'm not trying, I also know now that there's actually sort of very little that I can do. I'm not going to go in and stop this, these problems or solve these problems myself. But the nature of the work is that if I take a compelling photograph or do a really compelling story, maybe somebody will see that and go on to do something that has really good concrete answers. So I have a lot of faith in that process, and that's what really kind of keeps me going, keeps me sane at times. One sort of amazing thing I saw, among others, is down in the Philippines after Hurricane Yolanda, which was the strongest hurricane to ever hit, to make landfall at the time, was just this utter destruction, and big tanker ships from out in the bay being thrown up inland and just sitting in the middle of town. It's all the trees knocked down. It's how in the heck did that happen? So just the destructive power of hurricanes, and the same thing in Haiti in 2010, the earthquake that killed over 200,000 people, just the destruction, the magnitude of that kind of stuff. But then there's also really amazing, positive, fun things too, and just seeing the spirit of people. And I remember after an earthquake in Nepal a few years back, hiking up into the Himalaya and being in a mountain town with this crazy view of Everest behind me, and being on this ridge with some Nepalese people and just drinking tea and photographing them, and just really special moments with the people. All of those are amazing, and every country's got something really, really cool and memorable and amazing like that.
Cool. How do clients find you? How does getting paid work in the world of photography and media?
Right, so in my line of work, my little niche of work, it's really more about sort of word of mouth and having relationships with assignment editors. So I work a lot with non-government organizations that do relief and development around the world. So there's always somebody inside this organization that's responsible for getting content like this. So it's getting to know that person. So that's usually director of communications or a marketing person or somebody in their photography or film department. And I've spent a lot of time going after those people, sending them an email or a phone call or a text just saying, hey, I'd like to get in front of you, show you my work. And so when I was just getting going, I did a lot of that. And when I go on an assignment, I get paid a day rate for every day that I'm gone, including travel days. And those are pretty standard rates for this kind of work that anybody in my shoes can expect to make. Then if there's post-production on the back end, like I charge for editing time, whether it's, to retouch photos and get those ready, or for, producing a finished video. And those are all billed on, how much time it takes to do that work. So.
Other than being away from family, what's the hardest part of your work?
Right, so the hardest part of this work, other than being gone and away from family, now, it used to be in the earlier days of when I was doing this, just the emotional toil that it would take to go on assignment and see a lot of this stuff. A lot of death, a lot of dying, a lot of hardship. That was hard at times. It sort of shifted now away from that to the physical demands of the job. I'm a little bit older than I was. When I was just out of school, I got a ton of energy and I could abuse my body in a lot of different ways, and shove myself into the back of an airplane, or get bounced around on a Land Cruiser for hour after hour and just take the punishment. But now it's harder on my body, so honestly now the hardest part is just the physical demands of the work.
Okay, yeah, of course. What gear do you primarily use?
I'm a Nikon guy. I have been since I picked up my first camera. That's not to say that there's not a lot of other great gear out there. I just happen to be a Nikon guy. I'm so fully invested now in my different lenses and different bodies that it'd be hard for me to switch. I've been super happy shooting with Nikon equipment. It used to be film cameras, then that was big heavy DSLRs, and now I'm shooting with a Nikon Z6 mirrorless camera, and it's great. It's light and portable and doesn't attract a lot of attention, and so the gear served me well.
Cool. Since you've done this so long, do you ever have to pause to think about your camera settings, or is it all intuitive now?
It took me a long time to get comfortable enough with everything a photographer has to do and think about with the camera technically to make a good photograph. And I didn't go from 0 to 100 on that overnight. It took me a long time to move from shooting in aperture priority mode to fully manual on my camera. But now it's completely just I don't even have to think about it anymore, which is awesome. That's where you want to end up technically. Now there are a lot of times when I go into a scene and I'll think, I want to shoot it this way, so I'll have to sort of think through at the beginning, like, how do I really want to approach this? But that didn't take very long to put the right lens on, and then I go. So now it's automatic now, which is awesome.
Do you still enjoy taking casual pictures of family and friends?
Taking sort of party pics or stuff of my family, like I love to do that because it's my family. What I don't really enjoy is having the expectation put on me, like, oh, Sean's here, he'll take photos. It's like, can I just be a normal guy and not pull a camera out? But yeah, I like photography enough to want to have cool shots of my kids and my family, and so I know if it's a special trip we're taking or a cool thing we're going to do, like we went and cut a Christmas tree a few weeks ago. I took my camera and I walked out of there with some pretty fun stuff that I'll have forever. That's the beauty about photography. It's like those memories are sort of locked in, and you've got those to look back on. So it's worth having.
Right. Would you encourage your own children to go into this profession? What advice would you have for a young person who shows interest in journalism and photography?
Any young person, including my own kids, that wanted to go into this line of work, I certainly wouldn't stop them, but I'd probably want to sit down with them and have a long talk, like, hey, look, there is a cost for doing this, that you're going to be gone a lot. That's not easy on relationships or family. It's not easy on your body to put yourself through that kind of travel. So I would just say, if you want to go into this work, really count the costs. Consider what it's like. And it's not like I'm getting rich doing this. There's very few people that make a ton of money or get famous from this line of work. So it's sort of like, you certainly wouldn't want to go into it with the thinking that you're going to get those. It's really more of like, hey, I want to be where things are happening in the world, and can I make that work for me and my my family? And if you think that can work, like, yeah, I'd encourage you to look into it. It's certainly really rewarding.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.